Hi, it's Michael and Anthony here presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for the current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, with Anthony Turner from the Small Business Mentoring Service, we'll interview a different small business expert or a fellow business owner and get them to share their best tips and insights for you, the listeners. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. Thanks also to our supporters, Kerr Capital and the Small Business Mentoring Service. Okay, so welcome to another edition of Small Business Banter Radio. It's great to have in Stephen Dowling. Stephen Dowling, amongst other things, runs a business called GrantHelper, and we're going to chat to him about accessing grants and how to increase the chances of being successful. Welcome in, Stephen, or Steve, as I know you as.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be here today.
And also Anthony Turner, co-host from the Small Business Mentoring Service. Welcome, Anthony, today.
Thanks, Michael, and nice to be back again.
All right, Steve Dowling, you had a pretty accomplished career as an executive with a lot of you did a lot of work in international trade, particularly with Japan. But over recent times, you've kind of narrowed your business focus to grants. So, do you want to give us a little bit of a recap of your career and how it led to being the owner of GrantHelper?
Yes, well, thank you, Michael. Sure. I've been working across a number of different industries. I actually started out as a translator using my Japanese language skills for a company called Rinnai, a Japanese appliance manufacturer. I worked with them for about a decade and then got some experience with a large trading house called Mitsui. And then since then, worked in a number of small businesses and did some time operating a international sales channel to Europe, where I grew the sales of that particular business from sort of less than $1 million to over $25 million in 5 years. And through that experience, I got to liaise with manufacturers overseas based in China as well. And later on, after a couple of decades of experience, I decided I wanted to do something else which was kind of a bit broader and more meaningful and contributed rather than sort of working in corporate. A mate of mine from Melbourne Business School was already doing something on his own, and so he asked me to come and join him and do some contract work for him. That was back in 2013. And then on the back of that experience, I got involved in the grants. And just sort of started out as doing some workshopping with startups. And then in 2014 or thereabouts, the Victorian government introduced some pretty significant grants. And so we offered that to some of his clients. And that was my sort of foray into doing grants. And I worked with him for about 4 years before starting my own consultancy, Dowling Consultancy, in 2017. And I've kind of offered my grant expertise, my international business development experience for exporters and occasional sort of general strategy work. And I found that I've kind of got a bit of a flair to help people with grants. That seems to be the area where I'm getting some good results, and it seems to be a sort of a sweet spot for me. So in recent times, I decided to spin off the grants into GrantHelper and put more emphasis on providing information about grants and helping people with a more dedicated focus towards the grants.
Excellent. So how big is the grant market at the minute, and at what layers of government can you access grants? Just broadly, because we'll drill into this, more specific grants that are relevant to our audience. But
sure, there's billions of dollars of grants out there, and they're across medical, food and beverage, defence, space, mining resources. There's regional grants.
Is it fair to say there's a massive and confusing array of grants that might overwhelm?
Oh, absolutely, and they're at various levels: state, council, federal, and it's a real sort of chore trying to keep up with them all. I get sort of grant leads on a daily basis. When I say leads, I mean information about grants that informs me, and I just struggle to keep up with all of that. So for the average Joe Blow who's running a business and not interested in grants, it's virtually, where do you start? It's a minefield,
Certainly is, Steve. I know in all the work that I've done with helping clients through the mentoring service, it's grants has been something everybody wants some free money as they see it,
yes.
But nobody really knows where to go to actually find it. I mean, obviously, people like yourself are there to help people both in the finding and then fulfilling grants. Are there some easy access points for people to get an idea about the sorts of grants that might be available to them?
Well, look, Google's not too bad at providing a sort of a foray into where to go. And it'll normally pop up with some grant consultants as well. There's a couple of kind of grant information service providers around. I subscribe to those and receive information directly from them. That's not normally something the average business would subscribe to. So finding a grant consultant that is well connected and knowledgeable, getting that sort of information is probably the best bet for the small business owner, in my opinion.
What are some of the sorts of things that people actually can get grants for? I mean, we hear about them from, as you mentioned before, about different cross-industry sectors and things like that. But what sorts of things can people actually get financial support for?
Yeah, so look, at this particular time, there's sometimes disaster relief, which we've seen with the bushfires in Victoria, New South Wales. Then there's flood disaster relief in Queensland available at the moment. There are regional development grants. There's a federal level and a state level across the whole of Australia. They're open and closed at various times of the year. But in a broader sense, manufacturing is a key focus at the moment, and that's where the government wants to prop up the nation's capability. And so there's lots of grants available at that level. There's also a fair bit of activity going on in the export arena and helping exporters to develop their channels, develop their relationships through innovative means given the travel restrictions at the moment and so on. There's the Female Business Founders Grant, which is currently open, and that's helping female entrepreneurs or business owners to grow their businesses. And so they're at various levels. It's it's across various activities as well as various industry sectors.
Is there some sort of common themes or principles of what a business owner needs to be thinking about in terms of preparation for actually applying for a grant should they find one that's appropriate to their needs?
Yeah, good question. And I don't necessarily have to find a grant. That's often where my service can kick in. People come to me and say, I've got this project. I want to build a new production line. I'm putting in a new piece of equipment. It's costing me $50 or $100 or $1 million. Oh, look, I want to, do whatever. And I'm wondering if there's any assistance out there that I might be able to get. And then that's sort of like where the conversation starts. And because I have access to the information services and the grant sort of leads, I can often ferret around and see if there's something that fits their profile and aligns with them. So really the starting point for the business owner is not to so much worry about what the grant is, but it's to think about what is the project that they want to undertake and be clear on what that activity is. It doesn't work well when businesses call me and say, oh, there's grants out there, what can I do to get that? Well, I have no idea about their business. When they're not turning around the conversation and say, look, the only way you can get it is to come back to me and say, you've got a project that involves this sort of activity. It's going to be this level of investment. Is there something that can, financially contribute to that kind of grant? So having a project is really key, and then going from there, basically.
Yeah. So what you're saying is free money can distract owners from whatever it is that is their core business. You're saying if you're in a business and you're developing that business and you're looking at new markets and new products, that's where you should start your thinking. And so you don't necessarily have to carry all of that capital expenditure and all of that financial risk yourself, but you're better to start with, how can I improve my business? How can I grow it? And then reach out to see what's available to support you,
based on what's required to make that goal and objective happen.
Right. So
yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned a few key areas. So clearly, manufacturing. I think manufacturing sovereignty became,
a real issue in last year, and then the federal government has invested quite a lot of money in that area to make it available for grants.
Yeah. So anybody in manufacturing anything, it's not a bad time to start to think about those sorts of questions that you pose for them.
Yeah, correct. And sorry.
No. Others. I think you mentioned food and beverage.
So
what are the top, say, 4 sectors where somebody listening?
Oh, it's actually six sectors.
Yep.
You've got resources. Then there's food and beverage, medical, recycling, space, and waste and clean energy. So anybody active in those sectors can currently take advantage of the Modern Manufacturing Initiative, which is currently being rolled out across Australia. Then the regional development funding available across Australia is kind of like a separate grant, which is more kind of applicable to regional businesses.
I guess one of the things that I've noticed with clients that I've helped in the past, Steve, is that often that they're probably not as well prepared in terms of their business planning, their marketing plans, even sometimes, their financials. And I think, would it be fair to say that, some of the critical elements is when you're applying for a grant, you really need to have a good handle around, where your business is at, where your finance is at, how you're going to use that money, the marketing, whatever it might be. Are those critical elements that they need to be thinking about prior to actually applying for a grant and getting those things right?
To a degree, Anthony, I think so. Often the grant applications require some sort of business strategy overview and a marketing plan as to how they're going to grow the business as a result of the activity that they're implementing. Yep. And the government's looking to support financially solid businesses. It's an investment. They're investors, and they don't hand out money to businesses that aren't doing well or haven't got a track record. I think having a strategy, and back to what Michael was sort of talking about earlier, that they really, once they think about what they want to do to grow the business and if they have a guiding strategy and a marketing plan to underpin that, it's generally going to provide a better outcome, because then it's not me asking the question when I'm helping them about, well, where do you want to take this? What are you trying to achieve here? They already know that answer, and they tell me what they want to do, and then I can overlay and align that with the particular grant, and then it works really well.
On today's edition of Small Business Banter Radio, we're chatting with Steve Dowling from GrantHelper.com.au. Steve, it sounds like, and it makes a whole lot of sense, that there's a lot of money around, very alluring.
Yeah, that's right.
You're
attractive,
but potentially distracting and
correct,
and overwhelming for a lot of owners. So the idea of it seems to me that over the last 5 years or so, there's been a number of grant help organisations. I'm not trying to steal your URL there, but generically to help work your way through these grants. What's available? How do I get it? So can you just talk about the sorts of businesses you've worked with and the value that somebody who knows about the grants process can add in terms of accessing the money and indeed delivering on the owner's aspirations to grow the business?
Sure, Michael. I think the benefit of using a grant consultant is that often the grant consultant has been there and done it before for another business. And whilst the businesses are different and unique, there are some common themes that the government is looking to address in terms of economic development. And so those sorts of responses can be, drawn from industry perspectives as opposed to, and then narrow it down to how does the business then contribute to that. So the knowledge and experience I get from working with other businesses contribute at that level. I've recently been working with a manufacturer in the food and beverage sector based in South Australia. They work across an entire supply chain from harvesting wild game animals and processing them and exporting the outputs as much as selling them domestically. And they utilise 100% of the carcass of the animal and have no waste. So this particular business is actually applicable across a number of different sectors: food and beverage, manufacturing, circular economy. And so I've already worked on a couple of projects with them, and they're looking at another project under the current manufacturing initiative. And in addition to that, I worked with a biomedtech company about 18 months ago and got them $1 million from the Biomed Horizons program. We went on to build the relationship and apply for some further research funding under the Medical Research Futures Fund. And then we're currently applying for accelerated commercialisation. And, so they're on the radar. When grants pop up, I often flick them a note saying, look, this might suit, what do you reckon? The technical guy there, he's got his head into it really well. And we, can quickly make a decision about whether it's worthwhile spending any time. And again, whilst that's a completely different sector to the food and beverage sector, there's often some common themes in terms of the questions that are asked. So I can bring across my experience from another sector, even though it's not particularly, exactly aligned with what the other sector is doing. I've also worked with a Melbourne-based manufacturer back in 2014. Got them, I think, 1.5 million for a factory development here, and then they went on to do some export stuff. I got them an export grant, and then they wanted to set up a factory in another state, and I got them a significant, around $2 million from another state for them to develop their business in that state. So, again, the principles and underlying sort of approach, whilst the whole business is unique and different, some of the common themes still apply to some of those grant applications. So I hope that kind of addresses what you're talking about.
It's a breadth of industries you've worked across, but you make the point that
there's others as well. Yeah,
you're drawing on the experience you have in the process of applying for a grant.
And that's what's really valuable to someone coming to me. Like I did a campaign on the current modern manufacturing initiative, and I've had quite a number of inquiries, and they just say, "Can I get it?" And it's like, well, let's have a chat. Let me have this discovery session about your business, and then I can give you a recommendation. And it doesn't cost anybody except their time to do that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't charge like lawyers do sometimes, but it's sometimes people are afraid to reach out there because they might be of the opinion, or a little bit apprehensive that they can't get out of paying something. Well, that's not the case. I think you find a good grant consultant, they're happy to spend the time because, for me, my reward is getting someone an outcome, and that's the outcome that I'm looking for. And there's an investment required to get, my time to get to that point.
So I think one of the benefits also of using a consultant in terms of grants or tender writing and things like that is that often there is a sort of a language that needs to be used when responding to questions. I remember I was sitting on particular tender review board at one stage, and it was a construction project that we were looking at a tender on, and somebody put in that they had 35 years as a builder, so that sort of qualifies them to to be part of the construction thing. I mean, obviously, the people who are going to give you the money are looking for a lot more relevant information than I'm a builder, and I think
that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, the benefits I see is that language thing. And what are some of the key sort of things that people need to make a consultant's life easier in providing those sorts of detailed answers?
Well, I think one of the skills as a consultant is being able to take whatever they tell me and interpret it and then articulate it in a way that is aligned with the theme of the grant program. And that's where the skill around language comes into play, because it's a story. We're telling a story about how a business is making some sort of transformation and how that transformation benefits the business, but also benefits the sector, maybe the local economy. And so has those sort of rippling effects, and the skill from the language perspective is then being able to articulate that. Often a business will only look at it from their own perspective. So being able to think outside of that and very broadly and capture as much of the kind of rippling effect of their investment as possible, and then using appropriate sort of professional language, not too kind of words that aren't, someone has to go and look up, but words that at times are appropriate, because the people reviewing, the panelists and assessors, they are educated people. So it's understanding when to use the right language to summarise or to consolidate some thoughts. But that rippling effect of the story is related to that language aspect very closely, I think.
Yeah, I think I can see those skills you developed as a language translator, in another form coming.
Actually, that's true.
Yeah. But this rippling thing, it's clear to me that when you look at grants as a business owner, they're usually terribly busy and can often, my direct experience is often goes, it's too hard, I don't have time. So think about getting someone who's an expert, like yourself. But I think taking the perspective that the grant isn't free money, you used the word investment before, which is an interesting way to look at it, because if you approach it, the money, if you get it, is money you can use to grow your business. But if you go about the process like whoever's giving the grant is another investor in my business, I think that might help tighten the owner's focus on the sorts of things they need to do to qualify.
I think you're right, Michael. And the other important aspect there is that the businesses are often required to make a co-contribution. So the skin in the game from the business. And whilst there have been, of recent times, a lot of cash handouts from the government at various levels due to the pandemic, to stimulate the economic development. When it comes to really big investments, often the government might only contribute 25%. But they range from 25 to 75, and there's the occasional 100% investment, but it's in tech fields normally, not in manufacturing. Like, for example, the biomedtech company that I helped, they were given 100% grant. They also contributed, by the way, more than what they got from the grant, just as a matter of interest, but it wasn't a requirement, but I'm sure that helped them. So, yes, the business owner, thinking of it as an investment in their business by an external party, whether it be government or an investor, is the same sort of approach. The thing is, at the end of the day, the business owner needs to also report back to the grant body on progress of implementation of the activity. So you can't really take the money and do something else, because then you've got to pay it back if you don't do what you said you're going to. You have to enter an agreement as well. There's a formal grant agreement normally, and it's a legally binding document that the business has to do what they say they were going to do.
There was a point I was just going to touch on, Steve, is the fact that there is often with these grants, there is that sort of responsibility of there is compliance, and also there is a cost of that compliance as well that a business needs to factor into when they're actually taking on a grant or thinking about a grant. I know some of the smaller grants, and I'm sort of saying the under $10,000 type grants and everything else. Sometimes in my experience, sometimes the cost of compliance is probably cheaper to extend your credit card than it is to do all of the work required to get the $10,000.
Yeah. I think building on that point also, Anthony, is the opportunity costs associated with applying for a grant, because there's often long lead times for some of the bigger investment type grants. And there's been occasions where I've actually advised clients to consider that very carefully. And I've had a number come back and say, look, based on the fact that it's going to take 6 months to get to the point of that, we decided not to go ahead. So that's another important, you could end up foregoing opportunities if you don't carefully consider it. So I take that into consideration as well.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Look, unfortunately we're at the end of our time, but look, a really helpful discussion. Thank you. I think the key things there is that get advice about getting a grant and don't put your hands up in the air and say it's too hard, too much paperwork. And I think someone like yourself can help. Yeah. I think the other thing that really shone through with what you said is that cascading, where we're all, as business owners, we're all in our own busy little world, our bubble, but being able to show how your business with that grant can add to the industry, can add to the national economy is probably a big missing element in some of the thinking about these grants. So thanks for bringing that to life. All the best, Steve.
You're welcome, Michael. Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you and your listeners today.
So that's all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. Anthony and I continue to be inspired by bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. For any of the links, resources or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact Anthony or myself, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on both Facebook and Instagram. Anthony and I would love you to tune in at the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.